So we're going to start by going through the updates to Archicad 25. We have that fully available now. I've migrated a couple of projects. We're actually looking at migrating a couple more in the next couple of weeks as a test. The first ones to migrate were sort of projects that are mostly done. But we do have a template that's all up and running. And in fact, I've just started the Yankukio project site model in Archicad 25, and we're going to use this to look at new features. The second half of this is going to be exploring updates to the building materials that we've sort of been adopting since Anthony took on the Makahakama project. And he's had some pretty good success at using sort of a more robust list of building materials. That update won't affect any projects currently started, but anything in the new Archicad 25 template is going to use that new list of building materials. So Anthony's going to show sort of how those work and the advantages of using a sort of more robust list of building materials. It's not going to be a sort of one-to-one building material to surface situation, but he'll kind of look at that. So I want to go through relatively quickly. The Archicad 25 improvements are not, there's not a lot here that's new from 24. One of the things that they've added, and I have it in the template, I'm just not sure how we're going to use it, is this built-in sort of data point. Rather than having north arrow as an object, what Archicad has done now, if you go to your Archicad and project preferences and project location settings, they give you the north arrow symbol that's tied directly to the north arrow. So rather than being an object, it's system wide. You can turn it on and off in the dialog box. You can reset it in the dialog box here, but basically it gives you a north arrow project wide. Super minor thing. Most of the time I think it just gets in the way as it just kind of floats there. And because it's not an object, it doesn't necessarily give you the option to lock it. So that's one thing. Other things are one of the features that I really like is if we look at our, let's just pull up the whole 3D thing here. So if I want to find a thing in plan view now, you know, like if you select it in 3D, or sorry, in 2D, you can hit F4 and show it in plan view, or sorry, in 3D. But we have the ability to select on floor plan now. And that works from any view. If you're in elevation view, section view, you want to see what that element is in floor plan view, it'll select and zoom to it in floor plan, which is kind of a neat feature. It doesn't isolate it out, but we also don't have to jump through the hoops of using the selections palette anymore. You can even go, I've got some stuff right here. You can select multiple things, for example, as long as they're all on the same floor plan, you can right click and say show in floor plan. And it'll select all of those elements in the floor plan view and zoom to them. So that's a really cool additional feature. One thing I'm not sure if it's going to get put to use, but I think it's important to note, we've been doing like presentation interior elevations with textures and stuff from Twinmotion, but the section elevation interior elevation markers now have this additional uncut fill setting. It used to just be uniform. Basically these first three or sort of these three right here were the settings we have or had. Now we have the ability to use the texture fill of that thing. And what that means, if I go to this elevation, we can show that that elevation with that actual surface image as part of it. You can see here that where it gets complicated and sort of maybe a little bit messy is you have to turn off the hatch for that. Otherwise, you have the hatch over the top of the surface image. You know, if I went to documents, for example, it might show a little bit more clearly, but that gray sort of hatch line right there coming through on that surface. But that it might be a quick way to do some in-house sort of presentation level renderings without necessarily needing to jump to a full Twinmotion workflow. It's not going to be the same quality as Twinmotion, obviously, but it is potentially a lot quicker. speaking of Twinmotion, the option to save out to Twinmotion, we go back to our 3D view here, you no longer have that from the file save as option menu. Archicad sort of relinquished control over that plugin. There is no Twinmotion option available here. The Revit option is actually embedded now by default, but the Twinmotion plugin has been given to Twinmotion to manage. So in order to get to that now, it's a little bit obscure, but it's cool how it works. You go to your palettes and pull up this Datasmith palette. From here, you can actually export directly to, let's see, let's go to the desktop, for example. You can export to the desktop for a Datasmith file, essentially. And then that can be imported directly to Twinmotion, just like an FBX would be. So the workflow there isn't any different. There is a live plugin option. So if you have an Archicad file open and a Twinmotion file open at the same time, you can import into Twinmotion that Datasmith link. We need to run some more tests before we know whether that works or not. But the traditional workflow of just export, import is still going to apply. We just have to go to Window, Palettes, and Datasmith in order to get to that export function. And just know that it's not an FBX any longer. It is going to be this Datasmith sort of proprietary thing. Other things that are of interest, there's some new library parts in the box library. Nothing that we would typically use, but the thing that I'm most interested in exploring are they've sort of taken their casework, which typically I always compared these to like Home Depot cabinet types. It was like the sort of big box store generic cabinets that you would get at Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever. There's a lot more settings in here now for how these work, how they look. Custom hardware and door functions work a little bit better. Configurations work a little bit better. Door overlay, Euro style kind of cabinets are possible with these now. So I'm interested in sort of building up a series of favorites. We haven't gotten that far into them yet, but these are sort of the biggest improvements that they've made to their libraries that I've seen. There's a couple of like furniture parts that are of interest as well. None of the detail parts have really changed or anything. So all of that's sort of the same. Survey points. And then the last thing is graphic overrides. Again, this is a really minor thing, but the ability to essentially override surface by a surface color. So you don't have to have a dedicated surface. If you want to override the surface or the pen, fill pen of an element, you can do that via the color selector right here. So you can literally, any RGB code can become a surface in a graphic override. And that applies to line pens. Let's get back to the rules here. It applies, sorry, not to line pens. It applies to background fill pens and surface pens. If any of those are to be overridden, you can select a pen for fills and for surfaces. Or sorry, still select a color instead of an actual pen or dedicated surface. It's something that might be useful down the road. You know, it's one of those things, good to know that it's there if you should need it. Now, sort of at the heart of what we want to talk about today, and sort of the biggest improvement to the template is about the building materials. And this is where I'll pass it over to Anthony here in a couple of seconds, but we've sort of built out in our template a more robust list of building materials and purged everything that was out of the box and unused. So we still have some defaults, like there is a concrete building material, there is air, there is sort of core framing, but that's now wood framing. And we're starting to break those down into individual elements. Like I said before, it's not the sort of thing where we're going to go, oh, well, I've got ceramic tile, stone tile, you know, whatever, decorative mosaic tile. You don't need a building material for every single tile type. But it's what Anthony's been doing on Makahakama with just a handful of building materials like this, sort of maybe 3, 4, 5 times the building materials we're used to, is able to see sort of a more dynamic model and cut section. So with that, I will pass it over to Anthony to do a demonstration on.
Hey, Patrick, can you repeat that? It's sort of cut out for everyone and myself.
Oh, on the building materials in particular?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so the building material list has been expanded. Essentially, what we did was we looked at sort of the primary building materials and finishes that we need within a project. We're not going to what I was saying about like the tile in particular. We're not going to have a dedicated surface, or sorry, building material for every tile surface we have in the project. You know, if you have ceramic tile, stone tile, mosaic tile, those can all be this one building material. Where it sort of shines is that we can then differentiate in a live section, see by cut fill, that tile is different from the sheathing and the gypboard that it's over. We still do have, and Anthony, you should be able to demonstrate this, I think, in the Makahakama. We still do have the ability to retain our sort of clean floor plan and section views, not necessarily looking at a lot of skin separator lines in the composites. And that's by simply adding a couple of extra pens to our pen set here for those additional building material patterns to show up as white for the finishes. So there's sort of that juggling of a couple of new pens and probably about 4 times the building materials we were using before. So I'll go ahead and stop the screen share on my end. Anthony, if you want to go ahead and pull up the Makahakama.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm going to show us briefly just several conditions of roof, ceiling, walled floor conditions, and so and speak a little bit or show a little bit of the different pens that Patrick just mentioned about. So here we have a presentation plan, and so with the regular floor plan and with some of the help of graphic overrides, you then will be able to see the different pens and building materials as they are shown here. And that's one of the nice things about this new change, is that you can actually see what the composite of a wall is rather than seeing just a general massing of it. And so if we change this from drafting to documents, it then sort of fills in that hatch to a white color to meet our graphic standards. And so to go to the building materials themselves, I started out with just a basic, let me move this. It was originally the basic template, but off of the template, I started building off a lot more off of that. And so everything I used to read composite. And so anything that reads composite has changed to being structural. And then anything with a finish is a finish. And like Patrick said, not everyone's going to have a one-to-one building materials, because I went a little crazy and did one for almost every finish and condition. But pretty much the important part here to keep in mind is if you're building off of a structural composite in the new template, you want to actually duplicate that that same composite, so it retains, rename it to the new convention, but it retains the building priority, the intersection priority here. And so that's important because the higher the priority, and the more likely it's going to cut through what we have here is finishes. So it's at a lower priority and so on. And so that's that. And so like Patrick had mentioned, let's see. I purposely did a couple mistakes here so that I can demonstrate live. And so here we have our typical building section with white fills all around, but I actually went ahead and updated this to be a little bit more detailed. That can go away. And so we have here some intersection here with the floor to the wall condition, and you can see how this framing automatically cuts through this concrete walls. And to show other examples, so this wall here is typically you'd have the framing come down all the way to the sheeting, and so when you do that here, it will automatically update and cut through this composite of the floor. Same here. And so you can further detail some of these conditions in your detailed sheets and up here as well. Go to a different section. It's the wrong one. And so here we have the wall that's going right through the roof here. And so to fix that, there's a trimming option that I'm sure you're all aware of. I have a shortcut for it, but oops. What is it? Yeah, that's it. So I'd like to trim this wall here to this roof. And so normally, if you didn't have these building composites here, then it will intersect a little differently and odd. So I just pin this and then, whoops, that was wrong. There we go. It's got to highlight that whole thing. You can see how it cleanly intersects here and other conditions. Again, like the wall to floor, you can build off of the composites to whatever composites you need. With the, oops, don't want that. You can begin to start building off of these composites here if it's just a general base, and just so that it can relate to your project specific. And what other conditions? So again, if I were to, this won't happen here, but if I were to just move this slab, which is a floor, it will easily cut through that wall right there. I think that's almost all the conditions. The nice thing about the other trick about building materials that you can do, let's see. So if you highlight a specific wall and don't know what building materials are there, you can open up the building materials dialog box, and then it will automatically highlight what is being used for that wall composite. But if you also wanted to check this way, that's also fine. Let's see. And the other nice thing I forgot to mention is that looking at this, it's a little different than having that white cut fill that we're all used to seeing. So you'll begin to now see the surfaces at every building section cut like this, because before it would automatically read as, let's just change it to that.
And we certainly still retain the option to do this, right? Like, and that's the case with plan sections and the live model is we might want to like scale this back in terms of level of detail that we're presenting early on or throughout early schematic design and even early design development. But understanding that we can take it to this this higher level of detail so we can actually understand these intersections. I think one of the things that we've struggled with in some projects is getting the sections to clean up properly so that they have that sort of gray poche and white sheathing and finish all cleaning up.
Yeah.
It's not exactly obvious what building materials are intersecting where, because we sort of over limited the building materials we were using. I think that this has a lot more potential to give clarity to how those wall to ceiling, wall to roof, wall to floor, wall to wall junctions and section are actually cleaning up and coming together.
Right. Perfectly said.
It doesn't change our graphic standards. We should still be seeing like from gypboard all the way to stud as a solid white fill in our documents. Certainly in the working process, you can look at this with all of the layers on. But then in the documents, we want to turn all of those skin separators to white. And that's what that sort of additional white pen is for. Do you pull the pen setup? Did you implement this? So Anthony sort of developed this in parallel to the template updates. So in the template, there's actually these two pens right here, which are meant for sort of the white skin separator and white background foreground fills for those new building materials, so that we can look at them with this full detail at say 1/2 inch or larger. But then in our actual 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch documents, those are going to all go to white.
Correct. Does anyone have any questions regarding this or Archicad 25?
I think with the building materials, I think everybody just needs to keep in mind that we're not abandoning our less is more approach to building materials. We're just sort of trying to make it more robust and a little bit more clear and transparent as to what these building materials are. You know, I certainly don't expect to see 30 or 40 building materials in the average project, but I think like Anthony was saying, if you start with what's in the template and only add as you need to, I think it should be a pretty easy workflow to start adopting, and always add by duplicating what's in there, because the building materials out of the box in our current template have really been vetted for how concrete, steel, wood all interact with each other.
Hey, Patrick, are those only available in Archicad 25?
There are a handful of this was actually started in our 24 template. There are a handful of projects that were started in 24, but it's sort of a very transitionary addition to our workflow. So mostly projects that are going to be starting in 25 are going to have these new features. If you are in a project that doesn't have more than the standard 5 or 6 building materials, don't try and adopt this. I think that you're going to end up sort of tripping over yourself trying to incorporate this concept, because ultimately the goal is the same. Our graphic standards haven't changed. We're still trying to maintain that sort of light pen, white finish, gray core with the bold pen. We're just doing that by expanding the building materials and incorporating sort of these new pens for the foreground background to show a little bit more clearly when we need it to. So you know, like now basically if you're pulling a detail, if you're copying pasting a section into 1.5 inch or 3 inch detail, you don't have to necessarily reassign all of the fills, because plywood is going to show up as plywood in that at that scale with the right pen set. But yeah, it's sort of only new projects moving forward that are going to be adopting these building materials. A couple of quick notes on in terms of 25 and migrating moving forward.
Yeah, I have a question though for 25.
Yeah.
Something you demonstrated. If you were to select a wall on the first floor or basement and then a roof and then try to see that in plan, how does that work?
You know, I don't know. Let me share my screen up and just try that. So let's see here. Share my screen. I hadn't actually tried that honestly, but that's a good question. So if I move this to, let's just put that on the roof story, and then grab this and this. So the wall's on the first floor, the roof is on the roof story. So it goes to whichever story was the current tab open, apparently. So I'm guessing if I went up to the roof story as my default floor plan tab and did the same thing here, I would hope that it would go to that roof. Select on floor plan and zoom to it with both selected. Nope, it jumps right back to the first floor. Yeah, no explanation on how you would control that. None of the new features listed that. Yeah, there's nothing there in terms of why that would only jump to the first floor, but that seems to be the default. Is if you have things on multiple stories and you want to select it on the floor plan, it's going to go to the first floor no matter what. Yeah, I mean, regardless, it's a useful feature, but yeah, that might be a limitation. There's also this handle right here that is sort of new, where you can actually pre-pick a plane. Usually, like if you had a free rotating element, for example, this is one that I didn't mention, but so morphs and shells are the free rotating elements. I think that this was on there before, but it's only if you have the editing plane visible. But you can predefine the plane that you want to rotate or move based on. So you don't have to like rotate and then right click and say choose plane. So it sort of shortcuts that a little bit by predefining that editing plane. But I think that's one that most people, the editing plane display, most people just have that off by default. So. All right, if there's nothing else, there is a feedback option, which is kind of funny. And if you wanted to really harass Graphisoft about every crash you get, you could always send them a report. So yeah, we're looking at migrating projects. Anthony's actually going to be, I'm going to be migrating Makahakama this week for him. And he'll be running that through the ringer, testing out Archicad 25 on a you're in design development now, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so fairly developed project. And then we're going to start drawing names for migration probably 3-4 weeks down the road if it all goes well on that project. I'm still running some tests, like I said, on the Twinmotion direct connect option. The preliminary tests on a really simple model were really promising. Matt and I actually kind of looked at that together the other day. It's a pretty cool little feature that allows you to just basically live link the two. It obviously has some drawbacks, like if you're trying to do some serious modeling in Archicad and that's trying to update in Twinmotion at the same time, it slows things way down. So you sort of have to know the workflow. The thing that I'm not certain about there is in terms of saving to the file server and connecting via the file server, maybe over VPN, how that works. I think it's going to still be like a sort of off the desktop workflow. But anyway, that's what we got. Those are Archicad 25 and Template 25 new features. I've also added, I guess while we're talking about template and we're only half an hour in here, I've added some favorites to the template as well. So we have now favorites for, oops. Let's see, coverings, roof and wall coverings have favorites now. So just some really basic ones: corrugated, standing seam, and tile roof, for a couple of favorite options, or a few favorite options. There's also some options for the walls as well. And those have been sort of sorted out to make sure that at least we're starting off with right pens and surfaces and materials and stuff that make sense. Like all of our favorites, they're just a starting place. And I think as we start adopting Archicad 25, we might start developing new favorites for some of those new object libraries that have come out. All right, guys. As always, the video will be up on the file server as soon as it saves out and uploads. I'll send everyone the link there as soon as I get that done this afternoon.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.